I think we can all agree that that was pretty excellent. Please put your hands together again for Mr. Nigel Farage. Now we move to the questions. I'll probably take it up to about 10 to 9, so let's work our way through. The first question is a bit of a dolly, really, but how would you better spend the daily EU contribution that Britain hands over?
Well, that's not a hard one, is it? By the way, could you turn the heating up, somebody? It's really not warm enough in here. I've spoken all over the world. I'd never imagined that Chester would resemble the black hole of Calcutta. But it does a bit this evening. I mean, those with poor circulation have a marvellous evening, I'm sure. Look, you know, we put a lot of money into the European Union. Yes, we get some back. Whether you look at it gross or net, we spend a vast amount of money being part of this project. One thing that is abundantly clear to me is, whilst there have been many failures within the National Health Service, and my goodness me, doesn't Mid-Staffordshire show you what can go wrong sometimes? But whichever way we cut this, we're living longer, our population is exploding, and even if we brought in the Australian-style point system tomorrow, we have a massively increased population, and medical science is now reaching levels where things that were utterly impossible a few years ago increasingly become demanded of right. And I have no doubt that even if we make genuine efficiency savings within the National Health Service, which I believe we should strive to do, there's been far too much growth of middle management, and certainly under Blair, far too many big, fat corporate companies making fortunes out of PFI deals, you know. I mean, absolutely, but the fact remains, even with efficiencies, we are going to need to spend more on an ageing, increasing population who, with medical science, want better healthcare. That, folks, I think, is unavoidable. And if the biggest saving from not being part of this union is to make sure that we have a National Health Service that can provide the best for our people, can I emphasise, our people? And I was criticised more in the general election than for any other subject, than for daring to say that I thought British HIV patients should be treated before international HIV patients, and I make absolutely no apology for that, or tuberculosis, or cancer, or whatever else it may be. It is a National Health Service. It is there to look after British citizens and British people and those who've been here for 5 years and paid into our system. And if the biggest benefit of not paying this fat bureaucracy in Brussels is we make sure, long term, our people have the health care they deserve, I'd be very proud to be a part of that.
The next question is from Dan. Do you think that the media and pro-EU groups are using the word Europe as opposed to EU to mislead the people and use it as a scare tactic?
Yeah, no, thank you. By the way, getting back to that last question, I was, before I came north last night, I live in Kent, but I popped into the local supermarket. I'd run out of a very essential supply. They've become jolly expensive over the last few years, but anyway. So I popped in to get this essential supply, and a chap there said, "Oh, Mr. Farage, lovely to see you." He said, "Tell me about the renegotiation." And I more or less said what I've said tonight. He said, "What about Britain's contribution? What about the money that it's costing?" I said, "Well, no, actually, Mr. Cameron is not renegotiating the money that we put into the European Union, and this chap cut up rough. He said, what are you going to do about it? I said, well, you know, I've only come in to buy a packet of fags, you know. I mean, he said, I've had enough of all my money. When are you going to persuade the Prime Minister? Oh, there we are. I can't always win, can I? And years ago, we campaigned on £40 million a day. That was back in 09. You know, why pay £40 million a day as it was then to the EU? And I got a London taxi. And the cabinet said, Mr Farage, this 40 million quid a day, what are you doing about it? I said, no, don't blame me. You know, I'm trying my best. What is clear in any national debate is the language that is used is really, really important, okay? And those that wish to remain part of this undemocratic corporatist club, as I would see it, want it to be called Europe at all times, as opposed to the European Union. And indeed, you know, I've written to the BBC Trust to make sure that the BBC do not allow this to happen. We are not talking about Europe, we are talking about a political union called the European Union. And my belief is the monsters in Brussels have hijacked the concept of Europe for themselves. Europe isn't that flag or those ridiculous old men in Brussels. It isn't the anthem. Europe is the most fascinating continent on the planet because of its diversity. Its diversity of language, of culture, of wine, of cheese, and everything else. And I'm actually very pro-European. I love Europe. I love Europe. I love the diversity of Europe. I've even married somebody from Europe. I mean, I've drunk more Spanish wine than is good for me. I like to holiday in France. I love Europe, but I hate the European Union, and I want us all to be free from it.
I mean, on that point of £55 million every day that we give away to the European Union, let's not forget they give us half back and then tell us how to spend our own money. So when you go to Liverpool or Manchester and you see signs everywhere with, thank the European Union, this project was built with European money, there is no such thing as European money. It's your taxation, it goes out to Brussels, they give us half back, they tell us how we can spend it, and then we're expected to say thank you very much. It's the economics of the madhouse. Anyway. Technical question. This is from someone who is too shy to say. You don't... I think Jeremy Corbyn has many things, but shy isn't one. When we leave the European Union, should we use Article 50 or repeal the European Communities Act?
Right. Now look, one thing that really amazed me was Cameron's counterblast against Norway, Iceland and Switzerland the other day. That wouldn't it be terrible? Wouldn't it be awful if we became like Norway and Switzerland? I mean, wouldn't it be terrible if we were rich? Can you imagine? It'd be terrible, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be awful if we were independent and self-governing? Wouldn't it be ghastly if we were allowed to catch our own fish in our own seas? I mean, what planet is he on? And Norway and Switzerland and Iceland have negotiated, being very small countries, but have negotiated terms of trade that suit them. We are a big country. We are a country of 65 million people. At least they're the ones we know about, you know. Oh, I should behave, but I can't. I've no doubt we're a lot bigger than that, really. But we're a big country. And look, this rubbish that gets talked. They wouldn't buy our widgets. They wouldn't trade with us. Really? Have you noticed in Chester how many German manufactured motor cars there are? Mercedes and Audis and BMWs, and until last month, a few Volkswagens too. But, you know, they sell us more than we sell them. They need us more than we need them. Now, the question was a very technical question. The answer to the question, Paul, is we, through the last treaty that we signed, are signed up to something called Article 50. And that means that we give a gentlemanly intention to leave the European Union. We then enter into a negotiating process that may last up to 2 years, at which point we leave the Union. I have no intention of this taking 2 years. I'd have thought a couple of months sounds better. All right? But rather than the technical detail, I think what matters, Paul, is the spirit. And the people we're saying no to are the Junkers and the Rumpy Pumpies. And the people we're saying no to are the machine in Brussels. We're not saying no to the governments of France or Germany or Italy or the Netherlands or the peoples of those countries. What we are saying to them after this referendum is we want to be your friends. We want to trade with you. We want to cooperate with you. We want to be good next door neighbours with you. We will accept exchanges of students and, in the right cases, common minimum standards. And we want actually to be the first country that leads, not just to us being free of the Brussels machine, but the whole of Europe being free from the Brussels machine.
Now, the next question is from John, and I think what he's talking about here is where the European Union is going, because, you know, let's not forget, when you vote in this referendum, if we stay in the European Union, we're not talking just about a European Union now, we're talking about what the European Union will look like in the future, what the European Union will look like in the 2020s, the 2030s and the 2040s. So the simple question is, what are the limits to the EU empire?
Oh, well, John. John, Mr. Barroso, who was the previous Commission boss before Mr. Juncker took over, Mr. Juncker, who some would have seen on television, who I'm told is very effective up until lunchtime every day. We've seen him in the afternoons, Paul, haven't we? I mean, lovely chap, he's just hopeless. His predecessor, Mr. Barroso, the former Portuguese Prime Minister, who, of course, had been a Maoist as a student. I mean, there's a very good sort of pedigree, isn't there? Mr. Barroso said once that we are creating the first ever non-imperial empire. He was honest about it. I mean, why else would they want Turkey to join, given that most of it's in Asia, as I said earlier, unless they were building an empire? And it's the classic thing of empires, keep expanding, and if you do that, you stop the populace focusing on the internal contradictions that exist within. It would appear there are no limits to the ambitions of the European Union. Turkey, I mentioned earlier, but what about the Ukraine? Yes, Brussels wants the Ukraine to join, and guess who supports that? Dave. Dave. And we wonder why our relationship with Mr. Putin, whatever we think of him, is as bad as it is. This is completely and utterly crazy. They're building an empire. They have no territorial limits. They could even go as far as the Eurovision Song Contest, which incidentally I believe, as a matter of national sovereignty and pride, we should withdraw from. Well, the judges. But I mean, you know, maybe Israel. I don't know. The fact is, this empire is expanding, this empire is centralising power, whilst at the same time, it's falling rapidly out of love with the European peoples. Don't any of you, please, go home this evening thinking to yourself, is it just us in England? in the UK who were sceptical about this, now from north, south to east to west. Increasingly, the peoples of Europe are coming together as one, though not in a way that was intended by the Treaty of Rome. They're coming together in their common loathing of centralised, undemocratic government, and there is now an increasing cry: bring back nation-state democracy and a cooperative Europe, and not the one that we have.
I was in the room the day that Barroso said that. It was a bit of a shock. And I must say, on Turkey, I mean, only 4% of Turkey is actually in Europe. The rest falls in to Asia. Now, next question comes from Chris. Is it true, as the PM reported, even if we succeed in leaving the EU, we still won't have control over our borders? I think he said something similar to that in Iceland last week.
Yeah, I mean, Dave is telling you that if we're not in the EU, we won't have a border at Calais, we'll have a border at Dover, and therefore somehow even more people will come into Britain. This is clear, arrant nonsense. Whether we're able to check people at Calais or check people at Dover, what we need to start doing is saying to people, I'm very sorry, but you can't come in. You don't have the means to come in. I mean, any of you that have been to America know what it's like queuing up. You know, you have to show an address you can go to. They may well ask you for medical insurance or travel insurance, and if they're not satisfied, you're out. And if you're going to work in America on a work permit, let's say for 2 years in New York, if it's 2 years and 1 day and you're still there, they smash your door down, put you in handcuffs, and deport you from JFK Airport. I'm not necessarily suggesting we should rush down that route, but actually controlling your own borders, it's about messages. It's about sending messages. And the message that we've sent, now for nearly 20 years, is you may as well climb onto a lorry and get to Britain illegally, because even if you're caught, which is unlikely, the chances of you being returned are less than 1 in 4. We've sent out a message: come to Britain illegally, work in the black economy, and all will be well. It isn't about border posts. It isn't about whether we check people's passports in Calais or Dover. I'm perfectly happy for us to check passports in Dover. British passports, not European passports. And anybody else that wants to come has to have a reason for coming. We must end this free-for-all. We must end this freeloading on our health system. We must make sure that those that come to this country are coming here with good intention. And once we've sorted that out, we'll welcome every single one of them. But no more illegal immigration into Britain. If you're caught, you should be gone.
This is from Ron. Nigel is probably the best known MEP in the country. Well, beyond the UKIP MEPs, I don't think any of them are known, are they? Campaigning to leave the EU is a bit like turkeys voting for Christmas. What if we or you succeed? Are we still expecting the UK to have a presence in Brussels?
Well, look, you know, it's funny, Turkey keeps coming up, doesn't it? You know, I've often said that I'm a turkey that I vote for Christmas. Look, we don't need MEPs. We don't need a British commissioner. We don't need any of this if what we want is to cooperate and trade with our next door neighbours, right? That's the relationship with Europe I want. I don't want to be part, folks, of a political union. And that is what the common market, that those of you here over 58 voted for, has become. It is a political union. And that is what this referendum is about. This referendum is not about Europe. This referendum is about European political union. And we don't need or want or desire any of it, and the sooner people like me are made redundant, the better.
Go on, just one, an encore. There we go. Last question, simple one, pertinent, relevant today. Can the Schengen Agreement survive the migrant crisis? Indeed, I'll expand that. Can the European Union survive this migrant crisis?
Well, hell of a question, and this is the last one I'm going to answer.
I know.
It's been quite a
The
long
last
day.
question.
I've done my best, but I'm getting a bit rackety now. You know, we are not part of Schengen, but we still, of course, allow the free movement of people from the EU into Britain. The difference is, to come into Britain, you have to show a passport. Oh, you're a convicted murderer. Jolly good, do come in. So, well, but there we are. You know, I almost wonder whether we shouldn't be in some ways. No, clearly, what Angela Merkel did in July was one of the biggest policy failures of any European government since 1945. To say, please come in, was a simply disastrous measure that led to countries like Hungary and Slovakia, you know, suffering from a stampede. And by the way, I'm just about old enough to remember the refugees that came to Britain from Idi Amin's Uganda, all right? And I remember the aeroplanes coming into Heathrow and very modest, humble, decent, grateful people saying thank you. Thank you to Britain for allowing them to come, and promising on the tarmac they would work hard and do their best within this country. That was what I was brought up to understand refugees were. Not people who, once they've got through the wire, kind of high-fiving and being aggressive. I repeat, the vast majority of these people are not refugees. They are economic migrants, and that is the truth of it. It is clear that the governments of Hungary and Slovakia and several others, that now their own relationship with the European Union, and in particular with Germany, is now being pushed to absolute breaking point. I can't predict right here and now where this will go, but if the European Commission was right yesterday that a further 3 million are going to come in the course of the next year, there are two conclusions I draw. One, that the very future survival of the European Union is under threat, and two, if this mad European train is now on course, or EU train, is now on course to hit the buffers, I don't want to be on the train when it hits the buffers. I want to be outside of it, safer, better, self-governing and British. Thank you.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.